Starship completes all pre-launch testing ahead of its next launch, which already has a date in sight. NASA presents the 24th Astronaut Group with some familiar faces and announces the launch window for the Artemis II Moon mission. Dream Chaser's bad dream has become reality and it'll no longer be chasing the International Space Station. And SpaceX tries to boost the orbiting lab, but falls short with a Dragon abort. As always, we've got all of that and much more coming up this week in Spaceflight. With so much to cover, let's start with something fun. On Monday, September 22nd, NASA presented its 24th astronaut group at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. This latest astronaut group consists of 10 people, selected from more than 8,000 applicants. For the moment, they're not technically astronauts, but rather astronaut candidates, often known by the term ASCANs, 1S. The 10 ASCANs are Ben Bailey, Lauren Edgar, Adam Furman, Cameron Jones, Yuri Kubo, Rebecca Lawler, Anna Menon, yep, that Anna Menon, we'll get onto it, Imelda Muller, Erin Overcash, and Catherine Spies. As one might expect, these individuals have had rather remarkable careers, and some are familiar faces too. This group comprises 6 women and 4 men, with ages ranging from 34 to 43. 7 have experience in the military, while the other 3 do not. Of those with military experience, 3 served in the Navy. Rebecca Lawler was a pilot in the US Navy operating aircraft such as the P-3 Orion, a rather amusing coincidence given that she might now fly on the Orion spacecraft. After retiring from the Navy, she also worked as a test pilot for United Airlines. Imelda Muller worked in the Navy as an undersea medical officer, while Erin Overcash is a pilot, having logged more than 1,300 flight hours. Another 2 candidates, Adam Furman and Cameron Jones, are US Air Force majors, having logged more than 2,100 and 1,600 flight hours respectively. Ben Bailey is a US Army Chief Warrant Officer who graduated at the Naval Test Pilot School and has logged over 2,000 flight hours. The last of the 7 candidates with military experience, Catherine Spies, is a former US Marine Corps AH-1 attack helicopter pilot and experimental test pilot. After retiring, she took up a position as Director of Flight Test Engineering at Gulfstream Aerospace Corporation. Of the 3 without military experience, one is Lauren Edgar, a geologist who previously worked at the US Geological Survey and also at NASA. Her work at NASA spanned over 17 years, including involvement in Mars rover missions such as Curiosity and the Mars Exploration rovers. Truly the sort of person you would want on your team if you were, planning to send humans to Mars. And well, if you aim to send people to Mars, there's a well-known company laser-focused on that goal, so it's no surprise that the other 2 individuals without military experience are naturally former SpaceX employees. One of them, Yuri Kubo, was indeed a Falcon 9 launch director for some time, and has also contributed to SpaceX's Starship program, as well as serving as director of ground segment. The other SpaceX employee is much more well known on this channel, as she's already experienced spaceflight and the zero-gravity environment of orbit. Anna Menon has indeed flown into space as a SpaceX astronaut on the Polaris Dawn mission last year, serving as a medical officer. Before being selected for that flight, she had previously worked at SpaceX for several years, contributing to crew training for Dragon and working at Mission Control in Hawthorne. But there's more. She also worked at NASA before joining SpaceX. During her time at NASA, she served as a biomedical flight controller in Mission Control at NASA's Johnson Space Center. Furthermore, she worked there alongside her husband, Anil Menon, who was a NASA flight surgeon at the time. They are both set to work together again soon, as he is also a NASA astronaut, having been selected as part of the previous NASA astronaut group in 2021. After reporting for duty last week, the 10 astronaut candidates have begun an intensive 2-year training period ahead of their graduation. This training will cover a wide range of activities, such as learning basic geology, survival training, learning foreign languages such as Russian, learning physiology and space medicine, conducting simulated spacewalks, and of course, flying supersonic jets. It's likely already a cliche that for every astronaut group we always say these individuals might be the next to go to the moon and the first to walk on Mars. However, given the current state of the spaceflight industry, this may be truer now than ever before, and the astronauts in our next story are a prime example of just that. NASA is continuing to make steady progress towards the launch of Artemis II, which is set to launch humans to the moon for the first time in over 50 years. Progress has been so good in fact that NASA announced this week it will open the launch window sooner than expected, from February 5th next year. This marks the earliest opportunity, but mission readiness will ultimately determine when Artemis II actually launches.
We just do not anchor on dates. We are going to launch when this vehicle is ready, when this team is ready, and we are going to go execute this mission to the best of our abilities.
Teams finished installing the launch abort system on the Orion spacecraft this week, with fueling and systems checks now underway. Meanwhile, stacking is largely complete for the SLS rocket, with its core stage, boosters and adapters assembled on Mobile Launcher 1 since May.
It's already 3.5 million pounds. It's unfueled sitting on that pad right now, and it's not even fully assembled, but it is so close. So you can see all this hardware, all these elements are there, and it's just waiting for its crew and its launch team to get us off of Kennedy.
Artemis II will be the first crewed flight of the Orion spacecraft, and the first crew to ride atop the powerful SLS Block 1 rocket. Traditionally, the first crew to fly on board a vehicle gets to name it, and this week, Commander Reed Wiseman and his crew announced that their Orion vehicle will be named Integrity.
We are bringing together an amazing workforce, and they are bringing together an amazing vehicle. And at the end of all that, when you squeeze it all down, it created magic. So we're going to fly around the moon in the spacecraft Integrity.
Integrity's crew of 4 will be the first humans to travel beyond low Earth orbit since Apollo 17 in 1972, and they've been training together for over 2.5 years now. Joining Commander Wiseman will be pilot Victor Glover and mission specialist Christina Cook and Jeremy Hansen. The 4 continue to rehearse for the mission in simulators, where they've learned to operate seamlessly as a team, including how to coexist in a limited space for almost 10 days.
We've really become a family over the last 2.5 years, and I think that's going to help a lot too. And we're also committed to mission success, that we are just ready to take those little inconveniences, but also the communication that it takes to know when someone does need a little alone time, and what are our signals for that, and how do we have both team care and self-care simultaneously to have that maximum performance. So we practice all of that. I think we're really in a position where we're ready to put it to work.
I wonder if we should make a video where we lock 4 members of the NSF team in a confined space for 10 days. That's bound to end well. The mission is designed as a roughly 10-day test flight, including a lunar flyby on day 6. The focus for this test mission is to validate systems and pave the way for Artemis III, which plans to land a crew once again on the lunar surface. The mission echoes early Apollo missions, starting with the crewed Apollo 8, which took similar steps towards the first moon landing. 2 of Integrity's windows will be pointed directly at the moon for the crew to make observations and hopefully capture lots of imagery. Despite sending astronauts to the moon on 9 previous missions, Commander Wiseman pointed out that Artemis II stands to be the first time humans have directly viewed some parts of the moon's far side.
And there is a very likely chance that we will see 60% of the far side that has never been seen by human eyes. Oriental has never been seen by human eyes, just because Apollo was always landing in lit sides of the moon, so the near side was lit, the far side was usually dark or crescent. And so we will very likely, depending on the launch period that we launch in, see things that no human has ever seen. And that was when I got addicted to lunar geology and Artemis II.
And believe it or not, human eyes are one of the best scientific instruments that we have. Our geologists are beyond excited for our eyes to look at the moon, and we've been training how to turn those observations into tangible science for them.
Artemis II is also an international partnership, with Canadian Space Agency's Jeremy Hansen becoming the first non-American astronaut to travel to the vicinity of the moon. To date, 56 countries have signed the Artemis Accords, a set of principles for nations to work and cooperate in space, with Senegal being the most recent signatory this July.
International partnership is fundamental to how we explore space, and I hope we continue to hold that up as a beacon of a way that we should work together.
Artemis II is a critical test flight, testing and validating many of Orion's systems in flight for the first time. The crew has developed an intimate knowledge of their vehicle and travelled to Germany, for example, to see the solar arrays integrated with the European service module.
What feels so fundamentally different for me on this mission is that we have actually been there every single step of the way of the spacecraft being built. No astronaut gets that privilege, and we have had that privilege.
Getting to have the technical know-how on this vehicle as much as we have, and as an engineer, I've really loved that process.
The mission includes a planned ship-to-ship call between Integrity and the crew of the ISS, and will conduct a number of science experiments, from releasing CubeSats to conducting human research experiments, which the crew will take part in. The 4 astronauts are going to be incredibly busy, right from day 1, when the crew will take over manual control of Integrity for the first time.
We're going to disconnect from that upper stage and then turn around and fly an approach to it, and we're going to fly it by hand. And we're going to make sure that the flying qualities of the Orion spacecraft are suitable for the more complex missions where we're going to dock to a lander or to the Gateway, the orbiting space station around the moon.
Significantly, the translunar injection, or TLI burn, on day 2 will commit the crew to not just reaching the moon, but to their path home, right through to re-entry. This will test Orion's heat shield for the first time with crew on board, travelling through Earth's atmosphere at over 30 times the speed of sound, up to Mach 36.
Because our TLI burn, the burn that gets us going to the moon, is also our deorbit burn. And what that means is, as soon as we take that burn, we have bought off on basically the rest of the mission, save a couple options to do a U-turn burn that are in there as well.
It's easy to overlook that fewer than 30 individuals have flown to or around the moon. Of those, just 12 have walked on the lunar surface so far. Artemis II will raise that count of humans to have visited our celestial neighbour to 31. This mission has a number of firsts and is also likely to break Apollo 13's record for the crew who has travelled the furthest from the Earth, but this isn't guaranteed and depends on when they launch. As the crew explained, breaking records really isn't where their focus lies.
I like to highlight the fact that it's not about farthest first, fastest, longest. It's about the teamwork and the work that went into that and the dedication that it took to take on those big challenges.
I don't think about it. That's a distraction. If we want to live up to the standards that we owe the American and Canadian and humanity in general, we have to be able to focus and know what the next right thing is to do. And so I actually spend a lot of time clearing that out of my head so that I can focus on my job.
For us, Artemis II is about much more than just going back to the moon. It is about the pursuit of excellence.
As Jeremy Hansen points out, if they do break that record, it won't be for long, and there's a far bigger objective here with the broader Artemis program.
If we're really going to go back and establish a permanent presence on the lunar surface and then go to Mars, this is awesome what we're doing now, but this is not the end. It gets even better from here.
Dream Chaser might be dead. Everybody's favourite baby shuttle has been facing serious challenges over the past few years, and an announcement from NASA might have just sealed the deal on if this spacecraft will ever fly to the International Space Station. The American Space Agency has all but cancelled the contract with Sierra Space, ditched the confirmed 7 resupply flights, and switched up Dream Chaser's demonstration from an ISS docking to a free flyer. So you might be wondering, just how did we get in this strange situation in the first place? The idea of Dream Chaser itself started in the early 2000s with a design derived from NASA's HL-20 concept from the 90s. Following an acquisition, it fell into the hands of Sierra Nevada Corporation in 2008, who proposed it for the Commercial Crew Program, and even received some seed money from NASA under CC-Dev Phase 1, CC-Dev Phase 2, and CC-ICAP, which were basically different stages of commercial crew development. But Dream Chaser fell at the 4th hurdle as NASA went with SpaceX and Boeing with Dragon and Starliner respectively. Following an unsuccessful protest of the contract with the US Government Accountability Office, Sierra Nevada proposed Dream Chaser for NASA's Commercial Resupply Services 2 contract, which is the contract Cargo Dragon and Cygnus operate within today. This proved more successful, with NASA committing to a minimum of 7 flights, resupplying the International Space Station with cargo and commodities. They even flew a successful approach and landing test in 2017 using an engineering test article, giving us a brief glimpse into a future of seeing commercial winged spacecraft returning to Earth. However, as aerospace goes, the timelines started slipping. The first mission to the ISS, scheduled for 2021, slipped to 2022, then 2023, then to 2024. But at this point, things actually started looking good. The media were even invited to take a look at the first vehicle, DC-101 Tenacity, while it was undergoing testing in Ohio prior to it arriving at the Kennedy Space Center that May. Tenacity arrived, and then silence. Oddly prolonged silence. The date slipped to 2025 with still no real word of what was going on. Questions were asked at press conferences to somewhat empty responses.
We haven't heard much about Dream Chaser. Do you have any update on where they're at with reviews and when we might finally see that fly to the station?
We still have some of our integrated safety reviews to do, and we're in the process with updating both of our schedules to try to understand where does that really put us. And so Sierra's working on that, and so I need to wait and just get information back from them to see where they think some of that work lines out. But we are looking forward to having them flying.
Time was ticking because, in case you missed the memo, there's only 5 more years left of the International Space Station, and that's not a lot of time to squeeze in the original 7 missions. So while disappointing, NASA's announcement is not entirely surprising. They've mutually agreed to modify the contract, remove the 7 guaranteed flights, and scale back Tenacity's demonstration mission to just be a free flyer in Earth orbit, launching no earlier than late 2026. So probably 2027. But what are some of the potential reasons for modifying the contract in such a way? Well, Sierra Space, as they're now known, are clearly going through some difficulty with getting this vehicle off the ground. NASA potentially could have been concerned that they wouldn't have all the required certifications in time for a flight in the near future. There's also the possibility that Sierra really wants to fly Dream Chaser to gather data and learn, but gathering data and learning in close proximity to the orbiting lab didn't go down well with NASA. Regardless, we don't really know for sure. It's not a question I want to ask, but will Dream Chaser survive? NASA has essentially said we might potentially maybe ask for a resupply mission to the ISS if we feel like it. But with Dragon and Cygnus holding down the fort for 15 years now, it's not exactly promising. There are commercial space stations in development. Sierra Space themselves are developing hardware for Orbital Reef. But again, it's another project in a future which is looking ever more uncertain by the day. Even if it doesn't get to fly to a space station, fingers crossed this fan favourite does fly, even if that flight is being delayed yet again. Now we'll take a look at some other stories across space, starting with SpaceX's Starship rocket, which is inching closer to its next launch. Earlier this week, the ship set to fly on Starship's next launch successfully completed its pre-launch test campaign and was rolled back to Starbase's production site for final launch preparations. The fun started today, however, when the US Coast Guard released a local notice to mariners warning vessels of a hazardous area for rocket launch operations off the coast of Texas. This is, of course, for Starship's 11th flight. The notice sets the earliest possible launch date as October 13th, within a roughly 1 hour window opening at 23:15 UTC, which would be 18:15 local time. This would be quite a quick turnaround, which isn't all that surprising considering how much more successful Flight 10 was compared to some of the other Starship flights this year. If all goes well with the launch preparations, in about 17 days we should see Starship fly again and demonstrate that Flight 10 was not a fluke. I hope it wasn't a fluke. It wouldn't be great if it was a fluke. Rocket Lab has news about a satellite going to Mars, and no, it's not the Mars Telecommunications Orbiter. They've shipped NASA's twin ESCAPADE spacecraft to Florida. Once again, the company is responsible for building the satellites and doing parts of the pre-launch processing ahead of launch, including the shipment itself. But the payloads have been ready for quite a while, and this was in fact not the first time they had transported the satellites to Florida. NASA's ESCAPADE spacecraft are set to launch on the second flight of Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket, but originally it was supposed to be on the first flight. So, to prepare for that first flight, in August of last year, the two spacecraft were shipped from Rocket Lab's facilities in Long Beach, California to Titusville, Florida for pre-launch processing. The plans changed a few weeks after that though, and NASA and Blue agreed to postpone the launch until a future flight of New Glenn. After that decision was made, the two spacecraft made the trip back to Long Beach to wait until a time much closer to the new launch date. Blue Origin's latest update on New Glenn's launch date is shortly after the middle of October. They tweeted today that the first stage, GS1, is headed to the pad in early October for a static fire in mid-October and, quote, launch soon thereafter. What does soon thereafter mean? Well, during the coverage of NASA's IMAP launch, Senior Launch Director of NASA's Launch Services Program, Tim Dunn, revealed the launch of ESCAPADE is currently being planned for the end of October or first week of November, depending on rocket readiness. So, given that, it's no surprise that the two spacecraft have returned to Florida this week. Let's just hope this time it's for good. Well, until the launch. Chinese commercial launcher Landspace has shared footage of its full-flow staged combustion cycle engine known as the BF-20, or Blue Focus, which it test-fired 2 weeks ago. The company says it has fired the engine up to 30 times so far, reaching a peak of only half thrust. The engine is targeting 220 tons of thrust, which begins to approach SpaceX's Raptor 2. Like the Raptor, this engine burns liquid methane and liquid oxygen. You might recall that Landspace was the first to successfully reach orbit with a methane-powered rocket, with its Zhuge 2. The company is now close to a maiden launch of its Zhuge 3 before the end of this year. Landspace has been developing this new BF-20 engine for over 3 years, and while it could potentially be used later on the Zhuge 3, it's more likely to make its debut on the company's subsequent vehicle, which is said to have a 10-meter diameter. The BF-20 is not the only full-flow staged combustion engine in development in China, however. The Academy of Aerospace Liquid Propulsion Technology is currently testing its YF-215 engine, which is targeting a similar 200 tons of thrust. 30 of these engines are expected to eventually power the first stage of the planned Changzheng 9, China's answer to Starship. Another full-flow engine is understood to be in development by Space Pioneer. The company is remaining tight-lipped about it for now, but it is planning a new test stand in Gongji, which will be capable of handling engines producing up to 300 metric tons of thrust. For now, it's focusing on the debut launch of the Tiangong 3, which Space Pioneer has delayed until November. This week, it performed some additional static fire tests of the first stage from its floating platform near Haiyang. Purdue University is taking its legacy as the cradle of astronauts to new heights with its first all-university crewed spaceflight. 5 Boilermakers, a mix of faculty, students and alumni, will fly aboard Purdue 1 in 2027, a Virgin Galactic suborbital mission to conduct live experiments in microgravity. On board will be aerospace engineering professor Stephen Collicott, along with graduate student Abigail Mizzi, and 3 alumni, 2 of whom are still to be announced. 5 participants from Purdue will fly alongside 2 pilots, sacrificing 1 standard passenger seat to make additional room for research payloads. Collicott's experiment will examine how liquids spread across surfaces in low gravity, while Mizzi studies fluid oscillations in microgravity. NASA's Flight Opportunities Program funded Collicott's seat on the mission, while Mizzi's is funded via donations, and the other alumni are covering their own costs. The mission builds on Purdue's long spaceflight heritage. Its engineering programs have produced 30 astronauts and many senior NASA officials, including Apollo legends Neil Armstrong and Gene Cernan, alongside shuttle commanders, engineers, and flight doctors. The university's research and alumni contributions have helped shape spacecraft design and mission operations for decades, and with Purdue 1, it's shifting how academia engages with spaceflight. Rather than just developing instruments to be carried into space, Purdue will now be stepping into the cabin and showing how universities can be active participants in space exploration and discovery. This is your weekly space traffic report brought to you by Next Spaceflight. This week was quite busy with an aborted Dragon reboost of the ISS, as well as several launches of Falcon 9 rockets carrying Starlink satellites for SpaceX's own constellation, Starshield satellites for the National Reconnaissance Office, as well as 3 science missions in one launch for NASA and NOAA. That launch in particular had a primary payload, NASA's IMAP, which was accompanied by the agency's Caruthers Geocorona Observatory and NOAA's SWIFO L1 spacecraft. The 3 are space weather missions with different objectives, but they're intertwined with one another. IMAP stands for Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe, and its main focus is to study the Sun's heliosphere, a bubble around our solar system of material created and expelled by our own Sun. As its name implies, IMAP will map the sky using several different instruments that will detect certain ions, certain neutral particles, and certain photons present in our heliosphere, which are there either because of the Sun's own activity or because of how the surrounding interstellar medium interacts with the heliosphere. This will better characterize the different interactions within and outside the heliosphere, as well as the properties of the interstellar medium directly surrounding the solar system. Other instruments will be responsible for the other side of IMAP's name, which will be characterizing the distribution, composition, and energies of different particles and dust that get accelerated by the Sun's own activity. On the other hand, there's the Caruthers Geocorona Observatory, which has 2 ultraviolet images that will look back at Earth to capture what's called the geocorona. The geocorona is a glow of ultraviolet light coming from hydrogen in Earth's exosphere that has been excited by a very specific type of ultraviolet light from the Sun. The mission is named after physicist and engineer George Caruthers, who, among many things, designed a compact ultraviolet spectrograph that was carried on Apollo 16. This spectrograph successfully imaged the geocorona, and it is one of only a few images we currently have of it. That is, until this spacecraft starts science operations. Understanding the geocorona can lead to a better understanding of the outermost layer of our atmosphere, the exosphere, and it could also help understand why planets lose their atmospheres. And then there's SWIFO L1, a space weather monitoring satellite from NOAA. This spacecraft will be constantly observing the Sun and sending a constant stream of data back to Earth to alert of any major changes in the Sun's activity. As if it were some sort of poetic coincidence, this launch occurred in the morning shortly after sunrise at the Cape, which meant our team in the field was able to capture live the transit of Falcon 9 in front of the disk of our Sun. Quite the poignant shot, given it was carrying 3 missions to study the Sun. Also, you didn't hear this from me, but there's a couple of these shots available as prints at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. This week we also have the launch of an Atlas V carrying out the 5th operational flight of Amazon's Kuiper satellites, and the 3rd to fly on Atlas V. That means 27 more satellites are in the constellation, which adds up to 129 Kuiper satellites launched in total. There was also a very secretive launch of Rocket Lab's HASTE, which is the type of Electron mission where they launch it suborbitally on purpose for hypersonic testing. Unfortunately, not a lot of information is available other than it happened this week. Rocket Lab also doesn't stream these, which is why you're looking at my face. Something that is streamed, however, is the International Space Station, where SpaceX once again reboosted the orbital lab. but not for as long as they planned. Only 3.5 of the 19.5-minute burn was complete before it was stopped due to, quote, being on unexpected tanks. Now, everything is safe, don't worry, but that's a new one for me. We contacted NASA for comment and they confirmed that the burn plan called for using 2 different tanks swapping in the burn. That, however, was not performed, and as such, Dragon continued pulling from the first tank, which prompted the manual abort. However, the following day, they tried again, and a 15-minute burn was completely successful. The space station is now at the correct altitude for the upcoming Soyuz crew swap happening later this year. Further afield in space, we also had the gravity assist of NASA's OSIRIS-APEX spacecraft by Earth, the first of 2 flybys planned before it arrives to the asteroid Apophis in 2029. Going into next week, we could have up to 3 launches from China, as well as 3 Starlink launches. We may also have another one of those very secret hush-hush haste launches from Wallops, and there's yet another Kuiper launch scheduled as well, but this one will launch on a Falcon 9 rather than Atlas. As always, you can keep track of these launches and many other events by going to nextspaceflight.com or downloading the app on your phone. With that, I've been Ryan Kazin for NSF. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.